Our agenda for today is that we will have a quick recap on our first session, which is the previous session, where we talked about HIPAA compliance, what is HIPAA compliance, what kind of compliance regulations there are, and we dived a little bit on what is the process to get the HIPAA compliance done or audited within your organization. We also covered in our last session around what is the EDI or electronic document transfer focus area for the HIPAA compliance. We are going to dive a little bit more deep into it. It is a 20-minute session, so I will try to keep it more logical and at a much higher level. Every environment, every infrastructure is different. Every customer has different circumstances. So, but we will give you some high-level logical information, which will talk a little bit more about what are the key factors to consider when you are planning your HIPAA compliant infrastructure, your business elements for implementing HIPAA compliance on Azure, which is one of the Microsoft offering on the cloud, and how HIPAA applies to on-premises and hybrid cloud scenarios. So this is going to be our session for today. We're going to start with the introduction and then a quick recap on that. So with that, I will ask John to come in and share a little bit about who we are.
Thank you very much, Tahir. Macrosoft and Kalsoft are strategic partners supporting clients across the U.S. We are both Microsoft Gold certified partners and have been so in excess of 10 years each. And we have found excellent collaboration between Macrosoft's custom software development services and Kalsoft's network, cloud, and migration services. So we complement each other very well and provide best-in-class services to our clients. So this is the 60-second commercial, and the rest of this will be informational session about HIPAA compliance. But we offer Office 365 migration services, moving people to the Azure cloud environment, setting up both local and hybrid cloud programs. We do custom software development around Microsoft Dynamics and other ERP solutions supporting your industry. All of our development work is using the Agile methodology. We have a continuous development DevOps procedure that is dictated by our Scrum methodology. And of course, quality is central to all of our delivery of our services. So with that as the 60-second commercial, we'll now get back to HIPAA and the compliance areas that we're talking about today.
Thank you, John. So I'll go through what we discussed in our last session quickly to give you a perspective. So in the last session, we talked a little bit about the 5 steps which are required to start your journey towards HIPAA compliance. And we also shared some of the common mistakes which people have done. So what we have done is that we have made the previous session available online. So if you want to go through that, you can simply go on the link and look at the recording for the previous session as well. So, but these are the following 5 steps that we talked about that, in order to get the HIPAA inside your organization, first you need to really understand it. And by understanding it, a lot of people, go through the definition of it, and from an understanding perspective, they feel that by having their healthcare EMR or HR solution that is HIPAA compliant, that is all they need. Well, that is not correct. So there are many other elements to HIPAA compliance, and you really need to go and focus on understanding what the compliance regulatory requirements actually are to ensure that you bring a properly HIPAA compliant environment and save yourself from any future breaches which can cause into multi-million-dollar worth of lawsuits. The second element was conduct an assessment. So in order to evaluate where you stand versus where the regulation states you should be standing, you should conduct a proper assessment of your infrastructure, your processes, and your applications. So most of the customers that we have come across, they are under the illusion that they are HIPAA compliant by just doing an assessment or by just bringing in an application which probably take care of their healthcare data. Well, that is only a very small percentage of the story. That is actually the tip of the iceberg that I usually call it. The underlying infrastructure, which is the core mechanism where you control your platform and data flow, you need to ensure that infrastructure is compliant with HIPAA. Then you have to define a roadmap. The roadmap should not only include your applications, it should include your infrastructure as well as your people. So how your people are enabled, how much awareness they have around HIPAA, and so on and so forth. Then you need to come up with an implementation plan that covers infrastructure, applications, and training for the people. And then you constantly monitor and upgrade your environment by doing audits and applying the patches, whether it is at application level, people level, or infrastructure level. So these are the 5 core steps that are required to start your journey towards HIPAA compliance. So by doing that, I have seen that when you start jotting it down at a strategic level and then building a tactical execution plan around that, you tend to identify a lot of areas and a sequence of tasks that you can execute to get the HIPAA compliance in your organization or for your customers if you're serving as a service provider for any HIPAA compliance requirements for a customer. So we also talked a little bit about how you can secure the core platforms to achieve the compliance. You have to follow through the modern security development life cycle. So currently security is on the top of agenda for almost every industry, and specifically healthcare industry, with the data breaches happening every now and then. Data has become a real big commodity. So now you can find a lot of threats arising on getting the data and then utilizing the data for many purposes, which can track back or lead back to serious violations for any organization which is maintaining that data. So data has become much more vital commodity as we speak, and in order to secure that data, there needs to be much more that needs to be done, as usually most of the companies that are doing now. So there is an added level of requirement at all levels. There should be an additional level of responsibility within organizations to ensure that data and compliance related matters are looked into and loopholes are sealed effectively, efficiently, and promptly, rather than waiting for a breach to happen. So this is an area we also discussed last time. You can go through our previous presentation where I talked about this slide. So with that, I will move to the next slide. So what are the key factors to consider from a today's agenda perspective for a HIPAA compliant infrastructure? We are mostly focused on infrastructure and platforms as a company, and we also feel that the underlying problem that usually end up having any company having a great compliance start with having a very strong infrastructure and platforms in place. So just like we drive a car on a very good paved road that gives us a really good feel and everything works well. So in the same way, the core infrastructure for any software application to run on, and that infrastructure includes both software and hardware infrastructure, is extremely vital to deliver a quality value either for your organization or for your customers. So in my view, if I can divide the core infrastructure area into four elements which can really help you tighten up your HIPAA compliance and regulatory requirements. And this whole presentation is mostly focused on one of the 3 pillars of HIPAA compliance, that is called as EDI, which is electronic data rules and electronic data flow, that what HIPAA talks about them. So using that information, I'm sharing these 4 areas which you need to look into to help build a HIPAA compliant infrastructure in your organization. So first, you really need to look at the platforms. So you need to extend and upgrade your server platforms. Most of the companies, if they are running a really older version of let's say a Windows Server 2003, which reached its end of life long time back, and they are still running that system, they're still on Windows Server 2008 and are not considering an upgrade, they are seriously at a level where threat can really come in. We have monitored that by upgrading to more later platforms like Windows Server or any of the later platform that you're using, you are actually sealing more than 60% of the threats that can arise. So with core platform upgraded to a newer version, you can actually start getting not even the optimized result, but you can also get added level of security and compliance regulatory requirements. HIPAA also talks about a regulation where it states that any company which has its core for electronic data transfer, they need to have an actively supported software infrastructure, which means that you cannot have a deployment of a Windows or any other operating system which is now not being supported by the core principal vendor. So for example, we will take an example of Windows as a Microsoft partner, we focus on that. So if your Windows has reached the end of life, Microsoft is not supporting the Windows anymore. If you have that Windows in your environment and there is a breach happens, you will be held more liable than probably anyone else. So upgrade your platform, the core software platform and operating systems. Access and upgrade your client platforms as well. I've shared in my last session that most of the breaches that they happen because of the local employees rather than external factors coming into and hacking into the systems. So it is mostly because of a mistake of an employee, or usually due to any bad intention that they take the data out and the data breach happens. So, but mostly it boils down to people not having a complete understanding or having a complete access and identity control and training around the system. So upgrade your client platforms. If you are still running a Windows XP system, you really need to upgrade, because you are not only opening a door for external people to come in because of the, I'm not saying it is a poorly designed security solution. It was the solution was designed, or Windows XP was designed for its time, and that time was almost more than 15 years back. So you really need to look into the time frame that you are living in with regards to the client operating system that you are using. And you have to keep the updates coming in regularly. When I talk about client platform, I'm not ignoring the fact that most of the users are now accessing information on their mobile devices. So you have to make sure that you are covering the mobile devices from all angles. There are device management solution, mobility suites which are available. You can deploy them. You can control the data flow on those devices. You can really control those devices. You can remotely wipe off data from that devices if they get stolen, or if they are taken away by anyone, or if they are lost. So all these things, they can really lead to a serious data breach. And with devices, handheld devices now having easily gigabits of memory inside it, you can literally walk away with a ton of healthcare records or PII information or any other information that can implicate the organization and cause a big compliance breach. So that is, from a platform perspective, this is an area which you need to focus on. From a software infrastructure perspective, you have options available. Most of the organizations have these capabilities available. They have already invested into these things, but they are not using them. One of the bigger examples is BitLocker. Most of the organizations, they have a standard Windows function for a BitLocker, but they are not enabling that BitLocker for their employees, which means that if a device gets stolen, if a laptop gets stolen, or if the device was thrown away and the data was not wiped out, and usually the way we are wiping out data today is by just probably deleting those files, and there are a bunch of data recovery tools that can result in these files getting recovered. So there has to be a proactive approach for encryption, and which can be done by BitLocker. So you can BitLock the Windows machines, and all the data inside it gets encrypted. So whether if the device gets stolen, or even if you lose the hard drive, or if you send a device for a repair, you will not end up losing your data. You need to have a good single sign-on capabilities. A lot of systems, they have multiple interfaces still being used. So by single sign-on, you are controlling the access and authorization of your users getting into the system and what they are looking at and what they are accessing. So you need to really put a tight lid on it. I would recommend that most of the companies, they should be using multi-factor authentication. A lot of people know about it. A lot of people are still using it, but mostly for their personal accounts like Facebook or Google accounts and something like that. But I am yet to see a much bigger adoption of multi-factor authentication in healthcare industry specifically. So there is, the technology is not very expensive. You can get all these things in. Probably most of the companies, they still have access to all those capabilities and licensing. I think it is mostly because of the implementation time or the change that they usually pen these things to a very last minute or to a point when it's too late. So I recommend you to talk to your vendor, talk to your infrastructure provider, talk to your Microsoft partner, that how you can bring those things in. I'm sure you will be glad to hear that they do not cost that much to bring those technologies in. and the value that they bring in from securing your infrastructure and environment, it does the job. The last thing that I just mentioned is device management. So I just again reiterate this. So you need to make sure that you have your device management capabilities out there. You should be able to remotely access your devices which are connected to your system and are carrying healthcare information and data. Communication and collaboration is the last point here from a core platform, collaboration platform perspective. We have seen examples that in 90% of the cases, the data breach happens because of the communication or the collaboration platform, which is either email or any other document sharing mechanism, whether electronic or in physical scenarios. So you need to secure your email. There are a bunch of services which are available. Your emails can be encrypted. You can simply enable write managements for your email. It is a default functionality that comes with a bunch of the email service provider, including Microsoft Exchange. You can, if you're using Office 365, you can have that encryption level enabled. You can have rights management level capabilities enabled. The smart way of doing it is to identify the users who are sharing that information rather than getting it for all of your users, because that might be expensive. But by identifying or segregating or building a process around your users, you can really optimize the use of this technology as while still not spending too much on it. So again, reach out to your service provider to get that information. Seek how they can help you with that. So even if somebody walks away with an email, they are not able to open that email and share any content inside that email because you have rights management capabilities around that. So in the world of today, we a lot of CIOs, IT managers, and maybe a bunch of software engineers are on this call or will be listening to it. We live in 2018 today. If we are applying the rules of early 2000 or late 2000s, that might not be effective today. So people are now on a hunt for such data information. They know how much value that it carries, how much penalties and fines there actually are, and from a regulatory perspective, the U.S. body is also regulating HIPAA more effectively than anything before. The recent Facebook incident has again fast-track data security to a new level as well. So look into your infrastructure, understand what the challenges are, fix them as soon as possible, and do not just fix at an application level, because that is just bandage on the top. You have to make sure that your infrastructure is secure, your platform is secure, because applications, whatever you are using, they are running on an infrastructure and a platform that you're using. And by platform, I also mean data platform, which means that if you're using Oracle or a SQL, how you are managing your data platform. There has been an example. I was involved in a scenario where data breach happened at a database level. So system was really secure at a top level. Access management was all there, but the database administrator was having administrative access to the system. So they secured everything but the data source or the data platform, and that is where all the data is. So a breach like that, that is even more dangerous than probably a breach that happens with some records at the top level, because the core data platform, if it is not secure or if it is not guarded properly, if there is no processes around that, you will end up losing probably everything rather than just a small bunch of records. So I will move to the next slide. What are the core? And the next slide will talk about the business elements for implementing HIPAA compliance on Azure Cloud. So since we are pushing a lot of our customers to consider cloud, and most of the understanding around cloud is that we will lose the data which resides on our premises into the cloud, and that will be more insecure. My perspective to that, and most of the industry leaders' perspective around that, is totally different. Cloud is even more secure than your on-premises system, because it has more reliable technology and much stringent processes in place to guard, secure the data. The cloud providers the core business of the cloud providers are only to provide the cloud services, so they really take care of their core business structure and business values around that. They have built a bunch of firewalls and security infrastructure around it. They have a very strong processes, and these companies are if you talk about Microsoft, if you talk about Amazon, if you talk about Oracle, they have a bunch of really experienced people, a very set of strong teams, which are working day in, day out on security, on compliance, on regulatory requirements, and ensuring that the cloud provides most up-to-date information and up-to-date security to the users. So in a way, the technology that they have built is more reliable, more secure, and more scalable than what we can get on-prem. So, but by being on-prem, we get an added satisfaction that my data is in front of me. That is a satisfaction that a lot of customers, they lose by thinking that if they're going to lose the physical data center, they're going to lose the data. So I can understand that that is more of a human instinct around that. But from a technology perspective, from a logical perspective, cloud seems to be a much secure option. So you don't have to go and adopt cloud right away. You can have hybrid cloud options available. You can start utilizing cloud in bits and pieces. You don't need to lift and shift everything that you have on-prem to the cloud. And we can certainly assist you on building a roadmap on how you can do that. But usually from a business perspective, a lot of companies have this question that how HIPAA is managed by a cloud provider. So in case of Azure, you can sign a BAA, which is Business Associate Agreement, which you can directly sign with Microsoft, or you can use a partner like us to have it signed. A Business Associate Agreement provides you with a bunch of capabilities around security, around compliance, around guidelines that can ensure the compliance, and you can easily share your BAA or on your HIPAA or high-tech acts with your customers to provide them with an added level of security that we have an agreement that exists with Microsoft on their cloud that is covering HIPAA. So there are options available. If you want a URL for that, I can share one with you where you can go and read more about it. With that, I'll move to the next slide. So how HIPAA applies to on-prem and hybrid cloud scenarios. HIPAA has multiple level of rules and regulations that talk about physical documents to privacy of information to how you can talk to certain patients, because certainly, there are options that patient-doctor communication can happen outside a software solution or software infrastructure as well. But since we are more focused on the IT component of it or the technology component of it, so I'm going to take one of the HIPAA rules, which is around electronic data exchange, which is called as EDI. So the EDI rule, it applies or it provides regulations on multiple levels, and I have broken it down into three. So it talks about regulations that you can use for products. So a lot of companies which are building EMR and EHR products, they can actually go and use these regulations at a product level. HIPAA also provides certain guidelines on how you can have a process on that. So process is where how data exchange is happening, how data is changing hands between one system to another or within one system. And it also talks about people that who are responsible for ensuring electronic data exchange, who is going to be liable for any such things. So with that, I would like to share, I call it a more of a pyramid approach that how HIPAA applies. So I will start with infrastructure. I give more weightage to the infrastructure because most of the time the breaches happen. The core result has been identified on an infrastructure level where it was either not properly configured or it was not properly updated, or there have been loopholes around that. There have been accessibility issues around that, and not a lot of people who should not be having access to infrastructure were having access to infrastructure, or the infrastructure was simply available for anybody to jump into for troubleshooting and able to take the data out or the systems out. So with that, I will share that how you can ensure or the HIPAA compliant scenarios for on-prem or hybrid cloud scenarios. So you need to ensure what HIPAA says, that you need to have an encryption at a hardware level. This is what HIPAA's core requirement is. So from an electronic data exchange perspective, you need to have encryption at a hardware level. So if whether you're using a SAN solution or using local hard drives, you need to get your data encrypted. So the data that usually resides at the infrastructure level is usually the data at rest, which means the data that is residing within your system. So you need to ensure that it is encrypted. From a platform level perspective and from platform point of view, I talk about Windows operating system, talk about SQL Server or Oracle database or any other backend solutions that you are using, whether you're using simple files to keep some information or any files and folder structures that you have, that all falls into the core platform. So HIPAA Electronic Data Exchange EDI requires you have a secure collaboration platform. So if you are collaborating between different solutions, or you are a system integrator which is providing integration to a healthcare provider, or you are a healthcare institution which has healthcare data that is going and communicating across different systems, you need to have a secure collaboration platform. Whether that can be a simple healthcare portal to an email collaboration platform, or a document sharing file, or you are having a telemedicine solution where you are sending PII information or PHI information of patients across. You need to secure it, you need to encrypt it, and you need to provide a secure the audit trail of how the communication has occurred. The second area is encryption. You can probably say that encryption was at an infrastructure level, but at the infrastructure level, encryption was mostly focused around data at rest. Then the encryption at a platform level is mostly focused around data in transit. So when the data is moving, is the data moving in an encryption format? While the data is in transit, anybody can pick the data feed and make some sense out of it? How are you segregating unique identifiers from your data packets that are sending across to other systems? So stuff like that. So you really need to look into your data in transit and ensure that you have an encryption around that. Then you should have regular updates for OS and data platform. As I've mentioned, that HIPAA requires you to have up-to-date operating system and data platforms which are supported by whoever is the vendor that is provided against whatever regulatory requirements and threats that exist. So make sure that you check in-house to ensure that your data platforms or Windows platforms or operating system platforms have not run out of support. You have a compliant data platform, as I mentioned, and you have a defined access level. So HIPAA requires, when a HIPAA audit happen, or if you have a breach, when an audit happens, or when you do an internal audit, you need to very clearly define what kind of access levels you have from different people who are using the system, whether they are using the system as system users, or whether they are supporting the system as managed service providers, or from an engineering team perspective. So you need to have very clearly defined access levels at each access points to ensure that your audit goes properly and bring in the good results. From an apps perspective, HIPAA asks, the latest HIPAA regulation talks about obfuscation level at the apps. So most of the people who are not aware of it, it is, for example, if I'm sitting as a billing user in your hospital, and a patient EMR file comes across me. So as a billing user, I should only be interested in certain amount of information. So for the information that is not relevant to me, obfuscation can show that information as static, or can totally hide that information from the screen for me. So the newer level of HIPAA compliance requires obfuscation layer to be implemented for users who do not have the access to view some information, whether they are from the same organization or not. Again, at an encryption, and the reason I'm saying encryption here with a star is that if you have encrypted your infrastructure and platform, then probably obfuscation layer will be ample for you. However, if you are sending your information to third-party systems, like you are accessing a diagnostic system that is residing at some other hospital or a diagnostic facility, and you are sending some patient information there, and you're receiving responses back on that information, you have some API calls, you are using some push notifications or something like that, then your information request on data that you're receiving has to be encrypted through whatever channels of encryption that you are using. The standard is SSL or 128-bit encryption. If you use that should be ample enough. So that is where the guideline starts and ends from a HIPAA perspective. You should have role-based access very clearly defined in your applications. You should have data exchange rules, which needs to be very clearly defined within your application. That if you are, and by data exchange rules, I mean if you are sharing the information even with a patient or with some other doctors or within your healthcare institution or healthcare ecosystem, you're sharing that information with someone else, that information has to have been defined under certain data rules. So that is the electronic data exchange or the EDI compliance requirements from HIPAA perspective. They apply to all levels, whether you are running an on-prem thing or something on the cloud or even in a hybrid cloud scenario. The only thing that changes in a hybrid cloud scenario that you don't have to worry about the infrastructure and the platform area. So you really are covered at the two of the largest components where the breach actually happens or the cause actually resides. So you eliminate that part from it and only focus around your applications. So with that, I end, and I would like to see if there are any questions. I would love to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Tahir. As always, a tremendous amount of information in a very short period of time. We're right at the end of our time. We have about 20 or 30 people logged on right now, but so if people do need to drop off, we certainly understand that. I received 2 questions from the audience at this point, and we can go through these, but certainly do understand if people do need to depart as we schedule this for 30 minutes. Our first question is, how different is it from regulatory requirements to have HIPAA compliance on-premise versus the cloud? So generally the question is, what changes in my HIPAA compliance when I'm at the cloud versus a local instance of my applications?
Well, from a perspective of people who are running the IT operations at an organization, it brings them a lot of ease, because if you are having a business associate agreement, you really don't have to worry about your infrastructure and platforms. So whoever is your cloud provider, whether it is Microsoft or anyone else, they are taking care of your infrastructure and platform. If you're running it on-prem, you're responsible for making sure that your hardware encryption is up to date. If you're buying any new equipment, it fits into well, it falls into the right specifications of providing that level of encryption. For example, you're buying a new SAN, it has to provide that level of encryption. Then you configure it in a way where it should be configured according to the regulatory requirements. The same goes with platform. You have to really worry about your Windows platform, your accessibility levels and everything if you're running it on-prem. So mostly on infrastructure and platform level, you get a lot of ease when you move to the cloud versus you remain on-prem.
Very good. Thank you very much. And one last question as we wrap up today. Do we need encryption at multiple levels? And if so, can you explain why we would need that?
As I mentioned that you have data at, again, encryption is directly associated with data. So that entirely depends upon how you are using the data within your organization. If you are a healthcare institution where data does not leave your premises or is not integrating with any other external systems, you can probably have encryption for data at rest only, and that will be ample enough for you with your application running on top. If you are an institution who has multiple applications which are using data that has PII or PHI information, I talked about in our first session that what information is considered sensitive from a HIPAA regulatory perspective. You can look into that session. So if it has any of that information and you are sending that information across to other systems, either within your organization or outside your organization, or using internet-based or SaaS-based applications which are provided either by third party or probably even if you are the host of that application and that application is hosted outside your infrastructure or network, you have to use data in transit encryption as well. So that entirely depends from case to case. However, in my view, the easiest thing is to make sure that whatever data that you have at rest, which means that if you're saving patient records, PII information, wherever you're saving it, that storage should be encrypted according to the regulatory requirements, at least.
Okay, well, thank you very much to hear. That's, again, a tremendous amount of information. This session is being recorded, so it will be available and distributed for people to view at a later date also. We will invite everybody on the phone today to join us at a future series that we will be conducting on a regular basis. Thank you very much, and we wish everybody a wonderful day today. Thank you.
Thank you.